to all of you for attending this press conference. My name is Greg Davis. I am a board member and chairman of T.M. Landry College Prep. I live in a part of Lafayette Parish known as North Lafayette. I have lived here all of my adult life. In North Lafayette, we have a serious problem of significant academic underachievement, especially among black children who are poor. All of the schools in North Lafayette are mostly black children who are on free or reduced lunch. All of my adult life, I have been an engaged citizen who has advocated for education reforms that would cause all children to perform at high academic levels, no matter their race, no matter their income, no matter their zip code. I have been engaged in an endless attempt to convince adults and children that all children are capable of high academic achievement, including children who are black and poor. In 2017, I heard about T.M. Landry College Prep in Breaux Bridge. I visited the school several times and found that this school was a living example of the high achievement possibility of all children, no matter their race, their income, or zip code. I transferred my grandchildren to T.M. Landry in June of 2018. As a grandfather and an advocate of education reform, I was very pleased with my experiences and the experiences of my grandchildren at T.M. Landry. Then, on November 30th, an article was published in the New York Times with serious allegations of wrongdoing. I reached out to other parents of students at T.M. Landry and to their children who attended T.M. Landry to ask if the article was consistent with their experiences at the school. Every parent, every student said it was not. We are a school with limited resources. We were not able to hire powerful public relations consultants or high-priced lawyers to help us determine how to respond to these allegations. I reached out to Linda Johnson to join the T.M. Landry board. I have known her to be an advocate for children who also believes that all children can learn. She accepted the offer and has been very helpful to us as we searched for the right way to respond to the New York Times allegations. I also reached out to a local attorney, Barry Salinger, for his advice and counsel. Mr. Salinger was very forthcoming with all of the help and assistance we desperately needed but could not afford to pay. At no cost to T.M. Landry, he provided his services to the school as its corporate counselor. Mr. Salinger referred us to Mr. Rob Kuick of Kuick Partners in New Orleans. He wanted T.M. Landry to hire a law firm that was far away from Lafayette to perform an investigation of the New York Times allegations. Kuick Partners is a very capable and highly successful law firm that we could not afford. Mr. Rob Kuick understood our financial position and offered his firm to us at a tremendously reduced fee. One reason he was able to do so is because his lead investigator, Mr. Paul Pasterick, offered his services to Kuick Partners pro bono. Mr. Pasterick, Mr. Kuick, Mr. Salinger, thanks to all of you for the work you have done to get us to this point where you have completed an investigation of the New York Times articles of 2018 and have prepared a report that you will present to the media and to the general public today. Mr. Paul Pasterick.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And I'm here today with Claire Pontier. Claire is one of the two lawyers who did the bulk of the interviews in the investigations that the Coig partner firm conducted. They did the lion's share of the work. I supervised it, but I also participated directly in a number of activities which are outlined in the report that we've given you today. I want to start by saying that as a former State Board of Education member and for a few years the president of the Board Association, and as the former Louisiana Superintendent of Education, I take these matters very seriously, matters of abuse or matters of educational efficacy. And I have done that for quite a long time, and most people who know me know that I am not bashful about saying what I think about things and calling them as I see them. All students deserve the best from the adults who teach them. No students deserve to be abused, nor given poor quality instruction. Our findings today are detailed in the two reports, the longer one by the Coig firm, because it carries most of the investigatory work, and my summary, if you will, but also my personal observations in the other report. Now, during my stints in public office, I've personally overseen investigations of allegations of many kinds, including the School for the Deaf investigation with student-on-student sexual abuse, and the improper use of corporal punishment in a school district in Louisiana, which I then preferred charges to the authorities on. In fact, as superintendent, I personally attempted to change the law on corporal punishment in our state to ban it. I have been unsuccessful in doing so for a number of years. Law still permits it in public schools. Over my years of public service, I've been part of reviewing the efficacy of teaching and learning in thousands of schools. I've made hundreds, if not thousands, of school visits, walked through classes, spoken to teachers and kids and in their school and about their school. In my experience, I have often found that students say what adults rarely do. They're often very honest about it. I always approach fantastical claims of educational success with skepticism, because anyone who does work in public education or in education K-12 writ large knows that there's no silver bullet. Likewise, there's no silver bullet to educate whole schools or whole school districts. However, in my years, I've seen many schools all over the country who beat the odds, who do what people say can't be done, and in educating poor students and usually minority students. And in fact, I've studied the phenomenon of beating the odds schools, both as state superintendent and subsequently. It can and is being done around our country. So it's with this background that I approached this investigation. Now, I've known Greg Davis for a long time. I consider him a friend. I've known Linda Johnson, a long time. I consider her a friend, and I served on the State Board of Education and as state superintendent. I know them to be people of high standards and who have high expectations. And that's the reason why I agreed to do this for them. But I agreed to do this on my own terms, as did Claire and her law firm. And the terms had to be that we were given full access to anything we needed to have, and that we would be able to do a full and thorough investigation. Now, I want to talk about the scope of our investigation. We were attempting to get a full picture of the matters that were reported in the New York Times articles in late 2018 and to report the facts that we found in that regard. One of the things that we did not evaluate are the finances of the school. We're not competent to do that, and I've talked with Mr. Davis about that, and other efforts will be made to address that issue. But I did not find those allegations that were made really to be material to the issues of alleged abuse or of the efficacy of education. We interviewed several students, and Claire conducted all of those interviews with another lawyer in the law firm. We interviewed 2 former alumni. We interviewed the seniors that were presently in the class as of January. We interviewed all of the teachers and staff present within TM Landry in the last few months. And there have been some departures in the last few months because they've had to be laid off. We've conducted several interviews with Mike and Tracy Landry. I had never met them before. I don't know them from at all. And I only had heard about the school before, like perhaps some of you have heard about it with the YouTube viral videos of students getting their acceptance into college. That's the extent of what I knew about TM Landry before Greg called me in late December. Neither of the Landrys were present for any of the interviews that we conducted throughout. So all of the interviews of the parents, the teachers, the students, alumni, all of the teachers, all of those were conducted without the presence of the Landrys. I've also spent time talking to Mr. Davis and Ms. Johnson, both of whom who've had children or loved ones in this school for a period of time. We've reviewed the records of the school. We've reviewed the records of the seniors, students, after receiving permission from their parents to do so. There was one case where the parent would not agree. Now, unfortunately, we were not able to speak to the persons who spoke with the New York Times. We made some efforts to do that and were referred ultimately to an attorney in Houston. Claire had several conversations with the attorney, and after a lot of discussion and offers on our part to conduct the interviews on terms that she would agree to, she declined to make them available for interviews. However, I think for our purposes, we evaluated this matter assuming that they would have said what they said to the New York Times, because it appeared to us to be that they made a first round of comments and then came back for a second round of comments. So I would suspect that I would have heard, had we done those interviews, to hear much of the same. We've produced 2 reports, one by the Kuig Law Firm, as I've said, and one by myself. I'm not practicing law these days. I'm doing education consulting. So one is the product of a law firm, one is not. These reports were just given to Mr. Davis and Ms. Johnson in the last 72 hours. I have discussed these reports with them a few weeks ago, the content of these reports with them a few weeks ago, so that I made sure that the facts that we reported were accurate facts. And they offered no changes when we had the discussions a few weeks ago, nor have they offered any changes, nor have any edits been made by anyone other than the Kuig Law Firm and myself. I think the reports speak for themselves, and I really don't wish to rehash all of the details that we have provided here. But I'm going to take the opportunity to give just a simple top line in the report. We did not find evidence to support the idea that there was or is a system or a pattern of abuse at TM Landry. As for the academics in the school, there was substantial evidence that there is real teaching and learning going on in this school. Likewise, there is substantial evidence that teachers and leaders appear to be passionate toward the students and effective in the work that they do. Now, as for the admissions applications of students that we reviewed, and after meeting with students to discuss them, we did find some discrepancies. There were essentially three categories of discrepancy. One had to do with mislabeling of grades from the official student record to the admissions record. The student got a B, but it was reported as an A in 2 courses. That was one of the record inaccuracies, the only one. There was also a report in the applications that a number of students were in the top 10% of their class. We determined that that was mathematically not possible because of the small size of the class, and we reported to the universities that that was an error and that that should not be regarded in their admissions decisions. Now, having some experience in higher ed myself, I'm presently very involved in it. I don't believe in this particular case that it was material, and I can explain why at some time if anyone wishes to discuss it. And then finally, there was a, what was the other situation, Claire?
Physical abuse?
Of the admissions.
Oh, admissions.
The 10%, the letter grades, and there was one other, I think. I'll think of it. It's in the report. However, when I take all of those matters into account, what I can tell you, in my opinion, that these inaccuracies or discrepancies were not material or would not have been material ones in regard to the schools. And this is why I will say that. Because this school has had a track record of delivering high-quality kids to universities around the country. Many of the kids who go to some of these schools are repeat admits to those schools. What typically happens in university admissions process is universities become familiar with feeder schools that have quality kids because they take a chance on a kid, bring them in, teach them, the kid is successful, and then the university comes back to that school time and again. And that's what we have seen when we look at the records of the high schoolers who matriculated onto the university. A number of these universities had taken several kids year after year. That is evidence, in my opinion, that the schools have confidence, not necessarily in the particulars of an application, but in the quality of the students who are being delivered to the university. That, coupled with the high ACT scores, was, I think, more material. So with that, I'll pause and I'll open it up for questions, and Claire and I will be here to respond. Let me
Mr.
grab my
Patrick,
water.
as superintendent, if you had become aware of a school where a teacher had pleaded guilty to beating a student, and also where there were at least 10 ongoing investigations by state police of similar allegations, what would you have recommended as superintendent?
Well, I certainly would have asked people to look into it and to square up what were the circumstances. Let's deal with each of those situations distinctly. What were the circumstances if there was an allegation against an existing teacher about some prior bad behavior? I would certainly look into that, and I would ask the district superintendent in a public school system to look into that. Were the allegations material to the continued teaching of the teacher? Were they related to the teaching activity? As a matter of fact, when I served on the State Board of Education, we had to look at a number of cases where certification could be pulled from individuals who had different kinds of legal problems, in many cases criminal problems, and had to make adjudications in that regard. So I would have asked the superintendent to look and determine what all of the surrounding circumstances were. Now, with respect to other allegations about investigations that were ongoing, I'm not familiar with, in this case, so many of those allegations that you're referring to.
You're not aware of a state police investigation of
You said,
these
I said,
allegations?
excuse me? I said, I'm not aware of that many allegations that you're referring
It's
to.
been reported in the media.
Many things are reported in the media, Ben, and I don't have
So you're
confidence
not
in their
aware of a
accuracy.
state police investigation into at least 10 additional allegations of physical abuse at the school, similar to the one
we
that was
have-
found in 2012.
We have reached out to the state police to find out what the status of any investigations are, and we have been foreclosed from learning what they are. We have not been told what they are. So I can't speak to what is actually happening. Now, get back to your basic question. Were I to have known about 10 pending allegations that were being investigated, once again, I would look to see what were those allegations related to, and I would try to determine whether those were material to the safety and the well-being of students. Now, one other thing I'll mention, which I think is relevant, is the one particular instance that I know is being investigated is the incident where Mr. Landry is supposed to have put a kid on the ground and put him into some kind of a hole. As I understand in that situation, that is under investigation, but also what we have learned is there is one statement one way apparently from the student, which is what the New York Times reported, and another statement that we received from Mr. Landry. So what I would do if I were superintendent is I would be trying to determine whether on an ongoing basis students were safe. Now, when I asked about this very question, how can we be sure that the activities going on in the school can be safe, especially in this particular case where there's an allegation against Mr. Landry? And what I learned is just after that incident occurred, which I believe was in January of 2017, cameras were installed in the school area to be able to report officially on what the incident might look like. These are cameras which would take video, record it, keep it for 3 days, and one of these continuous loop kind of cameras. So one of the things that interested me was that there was a way for the school to be able to demonstrate that kids were safe in the school. So I actually spoke to Mr. Davis about this, him being a member of the board of directors. They have recently moved the school because they've downsized their student population to a new location. And my question was, have the cameras been in the earlier school since that occurrence in 2017? They were until they moved out of that school, and cameras have been reinstalled in this new school. So that would satisfy me that there was a way to assure that kids were being protected.
Is Mr. Landry still actively part of the day-to-day operations of the school?
He is a teacher there, and he still leads the school. However, the school board of Landry has been changed. He has withdrawn as a member of the board, so has his wife, Ms. Landry, and Mr. Davis and Ms. Johnson are now the directors on the board. And as a consequence, my understanding in our interviews and investigation is they are on site, mostly Mr. Davis is on site at the school on a regular basis, has conversations with students, teachers, and the Landrys to assure that things are stable in the school.
Have any other students left pending these investigations and since the New York Times articles been
Have
come out?
students left?
Yes.
Oh, yes. They've had a number of students who have left the school.
Do you know the current enrollment?
I don't know. Greg, do you know current enrollment?
At the time of the New York Times article, we were at 110 students. We're now down to 63. At the time of the article, we had 16 seniors. We're now down to 4.
Have you contacted the New York Times or any of the writers in regards to your report?
Have not.
Do you feel this investigation was robust enough since the ones interviewed and making the allegations were not able to be interviewed?
Well, obviously, I would like to have interviewed them directly. I think it is robust enough because, as I said before, when I make the statement that there's not a systemic pattern of abuse in the school, I'm assuming that what they're saying is true, and I am then comparing that to what we're hearing from students, what we're hearing from teachers. I mean, we heard over and over from students that this was not their experience, from alumni that this was not their experience. It did not match with what they heard in the New York Times. So I would like to have interviewed them, but you know, there are many instances where one does an investigation, whether it's a legal investigation, as Claire and I have done many times, or whether it's a school investigation where, for whatever reason, you can't get to all of the people. And then you have to make judgments about, okay, well, given that they would say this in these circumstances and these others say this, how do I make a judgment? So it's not like I didn't have any information. We had the New York Times
Did you
information.
talk to the victim from the 2012 incident?
No, we did not talk to the victim.
Did you
of the
talk to
2012.
anybody with any complaints whatsoever?
We talked to no one with a complaint. All of the people we talked to had no complaints.
I'm talking about people who have made complaints.
We were not permitted to by their lawyer.
How can this be a conclusive report if you're not talking to anybody who has made allegations, and there are allegations out there?
It's not for me to say what the efficacy of the report is. You can judge that on your own. But what we did was talk to everybody that we could possibly talk to that would be willing to talk to us. I don't have subpoena power. I can't make people do things. I have to do that voluntarily. But what I can tell you is, with the interviews that we conducted, the extent of them, the care that we took, I think that the facts that we found are valid. People can judge for themselves how these facts weigh against other facts that may be reported.
Going back to enrollment, obviously, it dropped during the past few months and stuff. How do you think that this report will affect enrollment at all, if any?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Did y'all interview parents?
Sorry?
Did you interview parents of students, current or former?
We did not interview parents of students. We interviewed the students with the parents' permission.
Who was in the room when you were interviewing the students?
Claire?
We interviewed 5 graduating seniors. 2 of the seniors were accompanied by their parents, and the other 3 were on their own. Can you hear me?
On their own?
Yeah, they came on their own with parental consent.
How old were they? They were seniors?
They were seniors. They ranged between ages 16 and 18.
Why not make it a protocol for there to be another party present?
Another party.
Someone else present to monitor the interview?
That wasn't.
Would that be a standard thing or no?
We had parental consent. The parents knew that we were interviewing the kids. We interviewed the kids at an off-site location, not at the school, and we believe that was sufficient.
Was anybody from the school employed by the school present during these interviews?
The administrator was not present during the interviews, but she was at the facility. She helped transfer the kids back and forth from school to the place that would be.
The administrator, meaning
Miss
Tracy
Landry?
Landry?
No, that would be Connie Moe.
So the administrator took the students to the interview and then took them back from the interview?
Right. Right. Yeah, she's a secretary, receptionist, and bookkeeper for the school.
Do you know what the third issue was that you brought up earlier?
Yes. Well, there are actually 2 more issues. So one was a student who stated that he took a course on the Common App program that he didn't take, and he had apparently filled out the Common App before the semester began. He later decided he didn't want to take that course, and he forgot to change it on the Common App. And then we had another instance where a student reported a segment of an ACT score, like reading or math, and the report was lower than his actual score. So we alerted Team Landry that there was an inconsistency in the score and what was put into the Common App.
And in all of these cases, which, again, in my opinion, probably not material to most universities, we informed the universities before they made their decisions on the students.
The report concludes the 2012 incident was a spanking incident. The victim claimed that there was choking and whipping with a belt. You didn't talk to the victim in that case. How can you draw the conclusion that it was a spanking incident?
I'm not drawing conclusions about that incident and what all occurred. I'm reporting what the facts were that we elicited from the people that we spoke to. I'm, like, again, as I said, if the victim said that that's what took place, then that's what the victim says. I can't
There's sections
conclude.
in here called conclusions, and it calls it a spanking incident. not a
Okay.
spanking incident.
Well, I think maybe it's semantics, but all I'm saying
It's
is,
a report.
well, it's semantics. That's what the evidence that we found said it was.
But you didn't talk to the victim.
You're correct. I've
Did you
said
review
that
the
several
police report
times.
of his claims?
Sorry?
Did you review the police report that had his allegations in it?
We requested police reports, but we're not able to get them.
I got it through a public records request. You didn't submit a public records request?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. But as I said, the reports that we got from the New York Times were based on their studies, and I assumed that their studies were what they said they were. So I'm not ignoring it. I take it for what it's worth.
Well, you're taking his word that it was a spanking incident.
I'm not taking anyone's word. You can be
The report
argumentative,
does.
but I'm not going to be. That's what we reported what we heard. That's what we reported. And I reported that in the report that we did not get an opportunity to talk to individuals who made the claims.
You interviewed 2 alumni. When did these students graduate?
Claire?
I believe that the students graduated within the last year or 2.
So after before or after the article came out?
Before the article came out, yes.
So there was no indication from interviewing those 2 that they were not prepared for the colleges that they were admitted to?
No, and quite the contrary. They're in college, they're doing well, they're enjoying their experiences at college, and the reports or the allegations in the New York Times report were inconsistent with their experiences at TM Landry.
This may not be material, but do you mind saying what universities these students go to?
I don't know if we.
We told the students that they would remain anonymous. I don't want to say anything that would reveal their identity.
But I will say this, and I don't know that we put this in the report. I mean, I've looked at the entire graduating classes from 2013 to the present. Who they were, what they did, which schools that they went to. We did not know the full names, but we knew they were boy, girl, went to this school, and graduated in such and such. There were more than 50% of these kids began with Landry either at the 9th grade or below. About 40% of these kids started Landry in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. There was also some claims in the New York Times that the only kids who were going to the fine schools were the kids who showed up in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and that did not appear to be the case. What we also saw were many fine schools that these kids had gone to, including Stanford, Harvard, Dartmouth. And as I said, when schools like that start to take young students from a high school or a feeder school, if you will, they begin to develop their own confidence in whether those students are capable and equipped. And that appears to be the case.
Do you think these schools are still confident that TM Landry students can succeed at this academic level?
Well, I can say this, that all 4 of the kids have been admitted to very quality universities, and it's quite impressive, I have to say.
What does Mr. Landry teach now?
Sorry?
What does Mr. Landry teach now?
Well, he teaches a number of things, but the principal things he teaches are mathematics. But like, for example, I went to one classroom where students were learning technical strategies on stock trading. These were 8th and 9th grade students. They were watching a YouTube video. They were self-directed. There was no teacher in the classroom. There was actually a glass that I was able to look at while they were in there. I was amazed that they were listening, paying attention, taking notes, and then I walked in the classroom and I started asking them questions. I don't know a lot about technical trading, but I know enough. So I started asking them questions, and I was very impressed that these young students, 8th and 9th graders, were able to communicate to me about these matters. But this is the kind of class that Mr. Landry will start with the kids, leave them to their devices, and then as his methodologies are quite fascinating, he has this strategy that kids will only be allowed to progress if they achieve a mastery score. It was interesting to me that these kids were learning at fairly high levels that they were with respect to this particular course. And I saw that in a number of cases. Now, look, there were a number of kids who were at very basic levels in some circumstances, not unlike you see in any kind of school. So it's a very, very interesting school. And I said earlier, there's some schools that beat the odds. I think this is one of those schools that beats the odds.
So if they score basic on, say, the LEAP test, then they would not progress to the next grade? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that would be the analog, but they don't take the LEAP test because they're a private school. But they do take a standardized test in the various subjects. It's a nationally normed test that they administer there. But then, in order to, but the teachers and Mr. Landry basically have them stand and present their knowledge and mastery of a subject to a panel of educators in order to establish that they've mastered the materials they say they've mastered. And then they're judged based on that, based on a test. And then ultimately they're judged on the ACT scores because they take ACT. All of these kids are college bound, so all of them are taking the ACT. And that's another way to cross-check the validity of the scores that they're getting in school.
I think it's one thing to be successful at the ACT. I mean, part of the article was that these students were being trained on
Yep.
how to pass that. So you think, despite this article, that they can think in a complex way and in order to succeed in college and aren't just being trained to pass these tests? Because you say that T.M. Landry has this method to evaluate students, but how is that method?
So, the method is that they have to ultimately perform on standardized tests. So it's not the teacher-developed test. It's a way for the school to measure against nationally normed percentiles.
Right, but I could go to an ACT prep right now and train.
No, I'm
myself.
not talking about ACT prep.
Okay.
I'm not talking about ACT. There are other tests that are used to check where kids are in their learning. And these are administered in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade to determine their progress. They don't take these repeatedly. They take them to measure progress. And it's these tests that are used to determine whether they are meeting it. Now, they also have to perform. Now, I actually saw, I walked around the school by myself and went to all of the tables in the school to see the kids work on Latin, on Hindu, on, it was very amazing. Mathematics, English language arts, and so forth. And I watched some kids working at the board, doing some very basic multiplication, addition. Some were struggling. Other kids would come and help. They use a lot of peer-to-peer work. But then I saw some kids who were doing algebraic, factoring polynomials and this sort of thing, and I actually know a little something about that. And I watched them. Mr. Landry would come up, write a question on the board, a big polynomial on the board, and say factor, and they stood there and factored. And that's a pretty good test of whether you can do it or not. Either x equals -2 or it doesn't.
Well, my knowledge of factoring isn't that well, so I have no more questions.
So what happens next? Is there anything after this?
Our report is done. My understanding is that these investigations are still going on, and if in fact, and maybe this is a better way to answer your question, if in fact there was an incident between Mr. Landry and the student that is not like Mr. Landry says it was, then that will be addressed in the investigation, I'm sure, because they will have real access to probative ways to determine the evidence.
Which
So-
case are you talking about?
Pardon?
Which case are you talking about?
The one that occurred in 2017. So the investigative work will come out. Again, we're not in control of that. We're not trying to answer the question of did it happen or did it not happen. But the other piece is the audit piece, and Greg can speak to that if you like. But that's it for us. Anything else? All right, I'll turn it back to Greg.
Okay. Any questions for me? All righty, well, thank you all very much. And if anything else develops, we'll call another press conference and make that information available to all of you at the same time. Thank you very much.